Legacy leaders, it's been fascinating. This past month with my clients, whether they're an executive for a Fortune 500 company or a small business owner with a team, I've been having to coach my clients on how to manage up with their bosses or other stakeholders from different companies and their team. And because I focus on working with women of color and allies, where I've already worked with about 2,000 plus clients in almost 7 years, I notice a pattern that the most challenging part is actually not the strategy that's difficult, it's the soft skills, AKA communication, dealing with conflict, managing your boss and other stakeholders, as well as your team, dealing with office politics. On a side note, I hate that this is called soft skills because communication, conflict, and leadership are hard skills. I also want to share with you that communication, conflict, and leadership, these are skills that can be learned. I believe people are not just innately born leaders. You can be taught. And in this episode, I'll share with you some tips, strategies, and scripts. And don't worry, I want to make sure you figure out your own style and flair of leadership. Like, this is not just a copy and paste of Elaine's leadership. And you might be like, Elaine, I mean, it's easy for you to talk. Actually, I was bullied when I was a kid. I was also a pushover, and I have been bullied at work. Thankfully, I hired my village. What I mean by that is I had a therapist, I had a coach in my early 20s because I was a director at a young age. And I learned the right tools on how to communicate. So that's why I'm so excited about this podcast episode. I figured if this has been a consistent theme with my clients lately. I mean, it has been for the past 7 years, but more so this past month. I think because when I'm recording this, it's May 7th and summer is about to roll in, right? That, hey, I should hit the record button for my listeners on this podcast. So before we get started, don't forget to please leave a rating and review, and also hit that follow subscribe button as well. It means so much, especially since the intention of this podcast is to provide a free and accessible resource to all. Also, a bonus, I know I have a little gift for you, is if you stay till the end, a little tip, you can fast forward this podcast, but there's so much great gems in this podcast episode. So you're going to want to listen to the whole thing, or maybe like increase the speed by 1.5, or listen to this while driving or doing an errand like folding clothes. But I'm going to be gifting you some word to word scripts to help you have challenging conversations with your boss and team at the end. So you're not going to have to want to like miss out on that. All right, let's drop the beat.
Hey, I'm Elaine Lucartas. I'm a business and career coach for women of color and allies. LA Weekly awarded me the #1 thought leader, and Apple News named me one of the top 5 business coaches. Done doing the most as a woman of color or ally, and you want to create your own definition of success and happiness? Well, grab your coffee, tea, or boba, and let's do some business and career real talk. Hey, legacy leaders. So before I begin, a little background about me and my professional experience. So at 22, I became a director at a political campaign managing 5 people. And yes, I was young. Not only was I young, I was also usually the only woman of color, only person of color in the decision-making table. Basically, I was the minority. And thankfully, I had an amazing ally as a boss. And when you start a career out of college, you often want to mimic your bosses and mentors who you respect. And I often noticed at meetings, he would assertively say, I disagree, and this is why. And because he did it, because I respected him, I started saying that. But often when I was at a meeting, I would say, I disagree. This is why. I did not get the same response he did. Instead, jaws dropped. And here's the reality. I realized I'm not a white man. And I was a young 22-year-old Asian woman who probably looked like a teenager at that time because, Asian don't raisin. And there's this unconscious bias of Asian women being quiet, not speaking up. And I had to learn that I was hired as a director, not to just do things like a dictator to a follower, but I was hired because of my skill set, my ability to manage a team, and to hold my boss and the company I worked for accountable. It's what I remind my clients, whether they are leaders and executives at a Fortune 500 company or whether they're a small business owner, that's what I remind them. And in my early 20s, it was really tough to navigate. I would ask my parents for advice, and them being Filipino immigrants, they were just saying, hey, listen to what your boss has to say, put your head down and do the work. And I realized that that was different in this country and this culture. Thankfully, in my young 20s, I hired my own career coach who was wonderful, but couldn't relate to my personal experience being a first-gen Filipino immigrant. Now, it wasn't her fault. It was just different experiences. And I will share, though, hiring my coach at a young age helped me increase my salary, change careers successfully to get my first six figures. And I hired a coach before it became what it is today, before it became popular, because I was just really tired of trying to figure things out on my own. And maybe you relate to what I have to say, but as a Filipino first-gen immigrant, and maybe for you, if you grew up in a traditional household, whether you're a woman of color, woman, we were taught to respect our elders, which often meant doing what they say and not questioning it. But when you grow up in this American country and you want to move up, you don't move up by just what others say. It's learning to speak up assertively. And when I graduated from my Master's of Leadership and Management in 2017, so I can work towards being an executive director for a nonprofit, I quickly realized I no longer wanted to do that. I realized that despite mentors wanting me to, and grateful for their support, it wasn't what I wanted. No, I am not blaming my mentors. I'm really grateful that they sought my best interest. I just had to learn how to honor my voice. Thank goodness for therapy, by the way, specifically EMDR therapy. And I also had to be honest, I was suffering from people pleasing. And that's when I realized I wanted to become a career coach for women of color and allies because of my own experience and how I was able to successfully navigate through my career. Yes, I got the raise. Yes, I was able to change careers, but I also got fired. I've also quit. I've also ended a job without a savings. Even before I became a coach, I was realizing a lot of my family members and friends always came to me asking for feedback, insight, and advice. So here's what I want to share to my fellow women of color and allies. You can both respect and honor the household and culture you grew up in while also thriving in a different culture with their sets of values. You can do both. It's fascinating because this past month, my clients who are both leaders and executives at Fortune 500 companies and small business owners who are leading teams and obviously working directly with a boss, or maybe they're a small business owner leading a team, they're asking me, hey, Elaine, how do I manage up? How do I manage my team? How do I handle all of this office politics? So I got a tip for all three of them, and you're going to want to take notes. If you are driving, just listen to this, listen to the replay again later on and take notes. So first thing, I'm sorry to say, your boss isn't thinking about you all the time. Even if they are the most incredible boss, they also have other responsibilities. They're also probably managing other people. On top of that, they have a personal life. So when they throw you a new task or project and you and your team simply don't have the capacity to do so, don't be scared to share that you don't have capacity. So here's a script I actually coached one of my clients through. I understand you want me to work on ABC project. By the way, whenever I say ABC, insert what it is for yourself. So let's go back. I understand you want me to work on ABC project, while at the same time, me and my team are focused on ABC. That is taking a lot of time. So let's discuss what project we would have to delay or delete, or if this is really important, what resources can we have, like other people that can support us? Also, another thing, not just reactive to a situation, I want to give you advice on is have something called a brag sheet. I've mentioned this a couple of times. If you've listened to my podcast, make a list of everything you've done successfully in your job. Now, this can be a messy Google Doc. I actually recommend a messy Google Doc because for my recovering perfectionist, because that's who I tend to attract, whether clients or this podcast, including myself, a messy Google Doc. Add numbers of maybe how many people you've managed, how you've increased sales or even decreased costs, or maybe you've saved time. This doc should be continuously updated after each win in your career. And when reviews update, like when reviews happen, update that messy Google Doc to a nice one and present it to your boss. On another note, be sure to update your LinkedIn consistently, like 1 to 2 years with these updates from this messy Google brag sheet doc. And if you want another podcast episode to check out on boundaries and managing your boss, check out podcast episode 47, Scripts and Strategies for Boundaries and Negotiations for WOC Leaders. All right, the second thing, managing your team, right? A cadence where you meet with your direct report, whether it's once a month, bi-weekly, or once a week, see what you have the capacity to do. A tip is to have them create an agenda for that meeting with top projects or priorities and statuses on each of them, what they need input from you, and also making sure that there's action items that are going to be done by specific dates. And action items could include whether gathering information, making a decision, meeting with certain people so that you know what's going on. The other day, I was actually talking to 2 clients the same day, separately in different sessions, and both of them are in my mastermind. One of them is a director for a Fortune 500 company, and she was sharing a challenge of how she's constantly thinking about solving her team members' problems. And another client who's a small business owner with a team of 20 was going through a similar challenge. And here's what I told both of them. I gave them the advice to empower their team to problem solve.
Legacy leader, I know what you're thinking. Elaine, you have such good stuff here. I want more. So if you want more tips and advice for your business, career, and life, sign up for my Gifts and Gifts newsletter at elainelu.com/join. That's JOIN. And here's 3 things you'll get when you join, because I'm like Santa Claus. I love giving. Number 1, funny gifts, because who doesn't love memes and pop culture references? This newsletter is so fetch. Number 2, receive actionable gifts. That's business, career, and life tips that you can start doing today. Third, the gift of me. Not only do you get my wins, but also my failures, my reflections. My Gifts and Gifts newsletter is like an up-to-date diary. Think Zanga or Life Journal for my fellow millennials, where I share vulnerable stories, relatable mistakes, and important life tips like what to watch on Netflix, like when's the next Bridgerton season. So if you're ready for those fun gifts and actionable gifts to create a more sustainable life, then join my newsletter at elainelu.com/join. That's JOIN. All right, let's get back to the episode.
So if you're having challenges of how can I empower my team to problem solve, here's a script you can use. I want you to grow and learn And one of the skill sets is problem solving. Knowing that you have this ABC challenge, I want you to think of one or a couple of solutions or scripts to share. And then let's check in 1 to 2 days on your suggested solution and figure out what to do moving forward. By having this conversation, you're actually empowering them to improve on their problem solving. Additionally, you are making sure you aren't creating this codependent relationship with your team members. This allows them to learn how to be a leader, think, and problem solve. I didn't mean to, by the way, trigger you if I said codependence on your team. But I think so often as women, we think, oh, I need to solve this for every single person. Actually empower other people to solve that solution. And if you want another podcast episode to check out on managing your team, check out episode 43, Leading Change and Managing Overwhelm for You and Your Team with Juliana Wise. And I've added this podcast to the show notes. So the third part, office politics. So kind of mentioned this earlier. I used to work in political campaigns. So I definitely know more than a thing or two about office politics. So what to do when working in a team or understanding stakeholders, whether they're in different departments, different companies. It's going to sound so simple, but a lot of people don't do this. It's kind of similar to creating a project. Create a table. It's something I learned when I was a young director. And actually, I've even updated it now that I've been a certified executive coach. I was reminded of this. Create a spreadsheet. Put every single person you work with directly, whether it's your direct supervisor, your colleagues, direct reports, stakeholders from other departments, or even companies. So that could be one column. And mind you, what I'm suggesting to put in this spreadsheet, you create your own. The second part is put their assistant or gatekeeper. The third part is how is she, he, or they motivated, whether it's the gatekeeper assistant or the individual. What is their communication style? Maybe specific individuals, it's you need to be direct, provide them facts. Other people need to be soft, like, hey, it was your son's soccer game. How was it last Sunday? So add that. And then also kind of like a qualitative study, make notes of what behaviors and scripts you notice for each individual works best when communicating with them. And not necessarily you communicating with them, but what you notice with other people. Like, oh, Joe was able to talk to this individual this way, so I guess I need to talk to them that way. And also notice behaviors and scripts that don't work for individuals. So I was working with a client who is having this challenge with just office politics into their new role and working with this also new department head. And there's about confusion between what the roles and responsibilities are. It feels like there's tension, but they have the same goal. And there's just, like I said earlier, confusion, like, I thought I'm supposed to do this, or I didn't understand that there's ramifications. So here's a script you can use if you're in that similar situation. I know this department/company's goal is to do ABC. And we both need to work together to accomplish ABC. So here's what my role is that I understand. And here's what I understand your role to be. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Do you also understand it that way? Is there anything I am missing or miscommunication? And here's a tip that I want to also share with you that I used to do. I don't do it so much now because it's like a muscle. I practiced it. But prior to meetings, I actually had one-pagers and even scripts where I practiced before a meeting. I would put, here's my goal and intention for this meeting. This is what I want to say. For me, what worked was doing a word-to-word script and practicing it. Maybe for you, it can't be word-to-word script. Maybe it's bullet points. But having that intention and preparation prior to conversations, just like we prepare for projects or assignments, it should be the same thing when doing meetings. All right, so I have shared the strategies and scripts on how to manage up, work with your team, and deal with office politics. And I just want to let you know, it does take time. It's practicing. It's like if you weight lift, because I do, like it's practicing before you move to your new PR. And also finding the right mentors helped me a lot, whether it was great bosses or maybe leaders from other departments, or even hiring a coach. So here's my takeaway that I hope you get from this. What I want to share is being a leader is a learned skill. It's not just if you're an extrovert or an introvert, you can be intentional. And guess what? You can create your own leadership style. I used to think, okay, this person's a great leader. I need to mimic how this person is. Well, that works for them, and that's great. Figure out what works for you. And a hard part for me as a woman of color, a first-gen Filipino immigrant, was unlearning the way I learned how to communicate as reactive and emotional in the household I grew up in, and how I can be more intentional and proactive. Now, are there times, whether both professionally or personally, I get annoyed and irritated? Yes, but I would make sure I would wait until I was calm and collective. Oh, that should be like another tip when it comes to managing up, leading a team, dealing with office politics, self-regulation. Make sure when you notice you're being triggered or it's a heated argument, breathing, like really deep, 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out. Also being okay letting the party know, like, hey, I could tell it's really tense in this conversation. I want to make sure it's productive. We honor each other's time. Why don't we walk for a bit and let's just recollect in an hour, or recollect and have this conversation tomorrow. I just want to make sure we honor each other's time and we know what to do moving forward. That piece. I think so often people are like, give me the strategy, give me the scripts. Actually, hold on, take a breather, self-regulate. And here's an action item I want to give you before this episode ends. I'm going to warn you, it's uncomfortable. I actually gave this action item to a client as she's moved into this new leadership role in this big company, is make a list of past conflicts in communication, miscommunication. This can be both personal and professional. And maybe do the recent ones because it's in the top of mind. Maybe you're going through one right now. So make a list of all those conflicts, how you handled it during the time, reflecting on what was in your control. And now that time has passed, how you could have communicated differently. And you will notice that as time has passed, without being reactive, you can be more objective on how to respond to the other party so that both you and the other person or party can create a great outcome for both of you. And since you stayed till the end, or maybe you cheated and you fast forwarded to the end, I did want to gift to you word-to-word scripts on how to have these challenging conversations with your boss. So you could go to elainelu.com/boss scripts. That's BOSS, boss, and then scripts, SCRIPTS. And if you're like, wait, how many S's? It's literally both words combined. And if you're confused, just click on the link in the show notes. So fun fact, when I started my coaching business back in 2017, I actually called myself an assertive career coach. And I love that I'm still coaching leaders, whether they're working full-time at Fortune 500 companies or small business owners, on how to be assertive. And a little teaser on a future episode, but with more Gen Z coming into the workforce and wanting to be mentored and spoken to respectfully, which I think is great. How you communicate with people will be important in your own leadership. And if you found this episode helpful, here are 4 things you can do if you feel called to do them. Number 1, if you could leave a 5-star rating and review, that would mean a lot to me and my team. We created this podcast for accessible education for women of color and allies. Each episode takes a total 4 hours to create, 1 hour to prep, and 30 minutes to 1 hour to record, depending on the podcast episode. And then my team spends another 2 hours to edit and market. And number 2, because we do care about accessible education, share this with a friend who is probably going through a tough time communicating with their boss, team, or dealing with office politics, so that they have the right scripts,
and tools and strategies. And don't forget to go to elainelu.com/boss scripts to get those scripts. Also click on the link in the show notes. Number 3, don't forget to hit that follow and subscribe button, because when you do so, it allows the podcast platform that you're listening to, whether it's Spotify, Apple, or another platform, it lets them know that this podcast is important for fellow women of color and allies like you. And number 4, if you are a leader, whether working at a full-time job or you own a small business and need support in your leadership and you're interested in working with me, then schedule an introductory legacy business career review call with me. I only work with 24 clients at one time to ensure each client receives the results they deserve. And you could schedule this complimentary legacy business and career review call at elainelu.com/call. That's ELAINELOU.com/call.